Welcome to this plenary panel today. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all the folks who are attending Navigating the Carbon World Conference. It's an exciting day in terms of climate action. I'm certainly hearing a lot of news. I imagine most of you are following the announcements, the international announcements, and certainly glad to have you all in attendance. I'd also like to welcome three leading voices from North America for the panel today. They're here to discuss the latest developments in national climate mitigation strategies, additional steps that are necessary to meet decarbonization goals, and areas of potential cooperation between countries, as well as impediments forestalling more aggressive actions. The order of actions today is that I'm going to offer a brief introduction to our three panelists. They're going to each take a brief couple minutes to offer some introductory remarks. We'll have some questions for discussion, and then I'll open it up for audience questions. So if you have questions you'd like to pose to our three panelists, my understanding is that there's a method where you can submit questions, and I'll be able to pull on those to read to the panelists. So the three panelists we've got, again, I'd like to welcome them. Dirk Forrester is President and CEO of the International Emissions Trading Association. Previously, he was Managing Director at NatSource LLC, the manager of one of the world's largest carbon funds. Earlier in his career, Mr. Forrester served as Chairman of the White House Climate Change Task Force. And prior to that, he was Assistant U.S. Secretary of Energy for Congressional, Public, and Intergovernmental Affairs. He now serves on the board of directors of the Verified Carbon Standard. He's a member of the advisory board of National Center for Atmospheric Research and the American Carbon Registry. Lisa DeMarco, our second panelist, is a senior partner and CEO at Resilient LLP. She's widely recognized as a Canadian and international expert in climate and energy law. She has over 25 years of experience in law, regulation, policy, and advocacy relating to all aspects of climate change and clean energy. She's the director of the boards of the Advanced Energy Center at Mars RS, Radical Inc., the consultation group of the Carney Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets, and she's the vice chair of the International Emissions Trading Association. And last but not least, Jean Lemire is a biologist by training. He's a renowned science communicator. He's conducted work on climate change and biodiversity that has led to major scientific missions. In 2001, he converted a large oceanographic schooner into a scientific research platform to help raise awareness about key environmental issues. And in 2012, he and his crew began the 1,000 Days for the Planet series, involving a 3-year world expedition to examine the state of the planet's biodiversity. Jean was appointed envoy for climate change, Northern and Arctic affairs by the government of Quebec in September 2017, becoming the first envoy in the history of Quebec diplomacy. I'd like to welcome all three of you. Thank you so much for participating in this panel. We're going to start with Dirk. Dirk, would you like to offer some introductory remarks to our attendees?
Sure. Thanks, Peter. A pleasure to be with everyone today, and to be here with Jean and Lisa in what the outlook is for increased activity in the climate area in North America, given what's going on in Washington today. It is a really exciting day, and I guess the big news for all of you, and certainly for us in the carbon markets, is about knowing the direction of travel for both Canada, the U.S., and a number of other jurisdictions. So we're all doubling down on the level of ambition. It's going to be a real stretch goal and how to get there, but we know we don't have any time to lose. And I guess for the Californians in the audience, this may be a welcome news that the rest of the country is going to be catching up with the leadership that California's been providing already, and sort of setting the standard for excellence in how to approach climate change. What's not there in the U.S. plan is a comprehensive program like California has. Instead, it's a program that fit for our current political circumstance that is based on maximum use of existing legislative authorities and a major infrastructure push. One piece of legislation that's there that could turn out to be quite pivotal is the effort to transform our electricity system, which probably will require federal legislation. But many of the other parts of the program are things that the Biden administration already has authority to work with. In fact, we think they may have other authorities that they could turn to, more comprehensive efforts, and we're hoping to explore those with the government as the program moves forward. But I think here in the near term, this push on infrastructure is going to be one that could be quite popular across the U.S. because it's one that gives Americans hope in the climate issue, because there is job creation that's part of it, and we finally get to start building some fresh new structure that sort of sets us up for the coming decades of even greater levels of action. There's some great incentives there for removals, particularly on the CCS front. But one of the areas that we would like to see more focus is around developing the natural climate assets that our country has. When you look at the big picture on climate action, the United States is blessed with a large land mass, as is Canada. So there's lots of potential for carbon removals and for paying our farmers to use improved practices that improve our soils, and the same for our forests. So there's a real potential there, and it'll be exciting to be in a position to work with the Department of Agriculture and the Interior and other parts of the government to deal with sort of the nature-based side of things to try to advance those solutions. Because we know we're headed towards a net zero target in 2050, and that net will be extremely important in engaging our entire economy and in really teasing out the powerful opportunities for removal in our country and giving them market value. So that net zero goal and an ambitious 2030 goal, I think, are really going to potentially stimulate a lot of private action. Part of this is also going to be stimulated in voluntary carbon markets. I'm glad Lisa's here we're task force voluntary carbon markets that Mark Carney has been leading. There's great potential there, great potential for a lot of sectors of the U.S. economy that might not otherwise be involved in these federal initiatives, but this could give them a way of contributing to the global effort. So I think it's going to be an exciting period, and one where our efforts, I hope, extend across borders to collaborate with our neighbors in Canada and Mexico, and frankly, throughout the Americas. The United States has been part of a grouping that was launched by the G7 that I believe Canada chaired this past year, called the Carbon Markets Platform. And I think this will be a place where we can explore further types of cooperation with partners. CORSIA is already a part of that, but there could be other areas where we collaborate in the development of market-based solutions. There's similarly a initiative that California has been part of, but the federal government has not been part of recently, carbon pricing in the Americas, which is really a discussion forum for building up common infrastructure and common approaches for using markets throughout the Americas and North and South America. Those forms of operation, I expect, will be will be by this administration, given John Kerry's interest in getting lots of other countries involved in helping us achieve the global goal. So I think it's time to, put on your seatbelts, put up the tray tables, and get ready for a really exciting liftoff of climate action in this country. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Dirk. Clearly a lot of ground and a lot of fertile areas for questions and discussion. Lisa, let me turn it over to you and offer you the opportunity for some introductory remarks.
Sure. Thanks very much, Peter, and thanks for having me, to the team at NACW, which always does a fantastic job. I'm going to follow up on Dirk's comments and really talk about the new certainty that we're seeing. And as we know, business in particular really hates a policy vacuum and uncertainty. And we've had a lot of uncertainty over the last several years that is really being remedied. So in particular, in the US context, to see the announcement that the US is coming back into the Paris Agreement, to see a very concrete NDC, nationally determined commitment, being presented today by the Biden administration, and to see increased ambition from both the government of Canada and the government of the US, as well as a Supreme Court decision out of the Supreme Court of Canada on carbon pricing, are all really helping regulated industries, corporates who are taking on targets, breathe easier in the realm of that certainty. So in terms of pushing the world towards a lower carbon economy and the preparation we've had, one could argue that COVID has been a very good trial round of where we can go and what we need to do to really push towards a low or no carbon economy in the very near future. And looking at the North American context, there are so many areas of potential cooperation that we see really being built upon, both in the terms of the Canadian budget released on Monday and in the terms of the US commitments and NDC released today. And just a couple of areas to touch upon by way of introduction. Looking to our totally integrated electricity grid. Certainly Canada has an electricity system that is over 80% emission free and can be very instrumental in facilitating an efficient and affordable transition to a net zero electricity grid by 2035, added by the US. Certainly Canada is in line with those commitments. Looking at our automotive sectors, we have a very integrated supply chain and manufacturing organization for automotives across North America. And in that regard, cooperation in and around vehicle fuel efficiency, electric vehicle manufacturing, battery production. We have very strong mining and mineral capabilities that are necessary for those batteries to be produced. Very area of cooperation. Great leadership out of the US. I want to point out and highlight Environmental Defense Fund and Angie right now for the organization and leadership they've shown. I should add the Rocky Mountain Mineral RMI on that in relation to the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Association. We have integrated transportation in and around aviation, lots of room there, and certainly in and around the associated sustainable construction and manufacturing and buildings and infrastructure. Got a host of cross-border that all provide for extraordinary opportunities. Last but certainly not least, nature-based solutions with a real focus on our integrated food supply chain. We are entirely integrated when it comes to sustainable agriculture and agriculture in general. So lots of opportunity, lots of room for growth, and I'm anxious to see the next year play out.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And I think we do have a lot of opportunities. So that's a good segue. And Jean, I want to give you the opportunities for some introductory remarks before we move on to our conversation.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's a privilege to be here this afternoon and a privilege to be discussing the important issue together with Lisa and Ender. Today, I hope to contribute to the discussion by asking and maybe attempting to answer two very important questions. How do we build a low carbon future? And what can a subnational government like Quebec can contribute to that future? I believe that we all know the steps that need to be taken and that now is time to take them. The growing number of governments now committing to net zero target is really a great thing, but it needs to be urgently translated into strong policies and actions. The pandemic has made it clear that our health, economy, and environment are linked, and we have to think more and more globally. Our action must reflect this connection by reaffirming the government's commitment to containing COVID-19 and rebooting our economy while putting us on the path of the net zero emission by 2050. Governments across the globe will spend billions of dollars to rebuild their economies. The time is now to invest in a healthier, more resilient future that leaves no one behind. And this is very important. So what can we do? Well, we face hard choices. Our challenge collectively is to change the way we invest and behave at the individual, company, subnational, and national level to reduce GHG emission while minimizing the impact on economies and society. In making the transition to net zero future, there are exciting opportunities for economic growth because with great need come also great opportunity. But national government cannot be expected to build our future on their own. John Kerry this morning said that we will need probably trillions of dollars for the next 30 years. No government has such a budget, so we have to work together. This is the key. Subnational governments, businesses, investors, civil society, we all have a vital role to play. Quebec strongly believes that states and regional governments have key powers across the most important sectors for climate action, including energy, infrastructure, land use, and finance. As such, we should see ourselves not only as important links between national government policymaking and city and business action, but as catalysts for action that can spread their inspiration and influence both upwards and downwards. In Quebec, we will continue to play our part. We will continue to set ambitious climate commitments. Like California and many other jurisdictions around the world, we've stated that we want to steer Quebec toward carbon neutrality by 2050. Considering that Quebec electricity production is already produced from clean renewable sources, we have to be honest and humble because we know it won't be an easy task. But believe me, we will be there with you and you can count on us. We will continue implementing strong policies. Quebec just launched its 2030 plan for a green economy. And we are making in that plan electrification our priority, mainly in the transportation sector, but also in building, heating, and other industrial activities. One of our key commitments is a ban on the sale of new gasoline-powered passenger cars from 2035. We'll continue producing and distributing clean energy to Canada and neighboring states. We can play a major role during that transition by helping others to achieve their goals. We are Canada's largest electricity producer, and we rank among the world's largest hydropower producer. We'll continue implementing strong and essential regulation, like our cap and trade system linked with California's, that help promote low carbon technology and encourage greater energy efficiency. And after becoming the first Canadian province to adopt a zero-emission vehicle standard, we are now planning to adopt a new standard for zero-emission heavy-duty trucks. We will also continue investing in green technologies that offer great possibility for new jobs and industries. We want our economy to be driven by the emergence of new businesses and strategic sectors, particularly with respect to the electric vehicle and batteries. Quebec is working on the development of an entire value chain, from mining to recycling, to create one of the cleanest batteries in the world. And we will continue, of course, to push for greater cross-border collaboration in both public and private sectors. Because altogether, we have to support developing countries and regions in their adaptation and mitigation efforts. That's why Quebec is also committed to supporting the most vulnerable population affected by climate change with a range of international climate cooperation measures which aim to support clean industry transfer of knowledge, and building capacity. I would conclude by saying that the need for leadership, aligned policies, and shared commitment at the global level has never been greater. Today's announcements are great, with new ambition goals by different countries, but we now need more than ever to transform targets to action. None of us is under the illusion that what we need to do will be easy, of course, but I'm optimistic and happy to see that the momentum is there. It's a real challenge it's a real change of paradigm, and we have to be bold in our action. So you can count on us. As you know, we have offices around all America, and we will continue to seek out and apply innovative, pragmatic, long-term solutions to build a safer, more resilient, low-carbon future the world needs. And we will be, of course, more than happy to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean, and thank you for highlighting. Certainly, California and Quebec have now more than a decade-long history of cooperation on climate through many ups and downs for both places, and it's highly valued here in California. So I want to begin by, well, thank you for your introductory comments. There's certainly a lot of important areas for discussion. I want to ask about the opportunities for cooperation in North America as a region specifically. As you've mentioned, we have a new NDC, a very ambitious 50% or more goal for the U.S., and that's representative of a much broader, dramatic shift in policy in the U.S. with regard to climate. Can you talk to some of the opportunities for transnational cooperation in North America that this shift opens up as a region? How can we best take advantage of the momentum and advance climate progress?
So I'm happy to jump in and maybe start by saying that it really is terrific to have the example that California and Quebec have established in the WCI of at least one way that a cross-border cooperation system can work. And we're extremely gratified that at long last, the federal government has settled its lawsuit against California. AIDA was an intervener in that lawsuit. And we're glad that district verdict, which was in favor of our position that cooperation was legal, that's sort of the last word on the topic as far as the courts are concerned, at least for now. And it's a really good precedent that we have that was frankly a real disappointment from the prior administration to pick that fight. So we do have, I think, a positive basis to move forward. And I think, what I would like to see is more effort to continue the information sharing back and forth about how we account for carbon and particularly how we utilize market systems to stimulate agriculture and forestry improvements into the market. California's done a bit of that, particularly in the forestry area, but I think we've got a lot to learn in this country from Alberta and how the systems there have worked with farmers, frankly. And I know that there are other states that are now interested in looking that direction. Interesting legislation, I think, voted out of the Senate Agriculture Committee today that would that would direct the Secretary of Agriculture to begin work on more methodologies and sort of preparedness work with U.S. farmers for nature-based reductions in the farming sector. We've got a lot of potential there, and I think a lot to learn from each other. But what I'd like to see is the development of kind of harmonized standards that enable us to establish those cross-border linkages in the future. And I think that's not just a story for the U.S. and Canada, but one that would be a really good conversation to bring Mexico into, because I think there's great potential for involving the rural sectors in Mexico that have a lot to offer in terms of climate benefits if they could get the right incentives. So that's one area that we're hoping to see scope for collaboration going forward. And this is part of what I sort of touched on, those two examples of the carbon markets platform and the carbon pricing in the Americas declaration. But both of those are, they're sort of like government expert fora for developing common solutions that can hopefully connect up later to provide an ability for our continent to do more together than we could do apart. I'll stop there.
Maybe I'll
Lisa,
tag
Sean?
team if I can. Sure.
Sure.
If I can tag, certainly Dirk spoke to the integration of markets. And in particular, we do have an outstanding example of California and Quebec really solving many cross-border issues around their linkage trademark. I think linking in general, not just of emission markets, but of electricity and emission markets. So the integration of emission markets and electricity markets at our very integrated electricity grid will be very, very important in building the necessary transmission grid, the interconnections at the border, and to efficiently incentivizing the necessary decarbonization of the sector in a way that customers can afford. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. I think in particular, there are very significant opportunities. Your FERC has done the initial work. Former Chairman Chatterjee has done great work in around emission market integration into electricity market integration, and we should be able to leverage that with Canadian energy regulators across the country. Secondly, in terms of where we're going with sustainable agriculture, I think there's extraordinary opportunity through the Science Based Targets Initiative, through a number of the pilots that are being held with people on both sides of the border, food producers in Canada, grain producers in the US, and the associated food chain that feeds the requisite livestock that is involved in the overall food network is incredibly important. Lots of opportunities there. And we're very anxious to see that. And our practices not just facilitate North American efficiencies, but really be used as a world example of the highest and best practices around precision farming, around logistics and transportation, around harnessing biogas, anaerobic digestion, and facilitating power production that is net negative in many instances, and getting food to people who can afford it. It certainly, in a way that it's affordable, is going to be very important. So those are the two big areas I see as front and center and imminently achievable.
Thank you. Sean?
Well, I really agree with Lisa and also with Dirk. So, I mean, we are at that tipping point right now, and it's so important to work together. So linking in general is, like Lisa said, very, very important, And it's not just to fight, climate change. It's to be able to um, take a step back and look at the nature in general. One example, we will work on a roadmap to Kunming for biodiversity with California. This is a good example because nature-based solution will be part, of the solution. Electricity, of course, will be part of the solution. Of course, we can have big projects locally, like big wind offshore, but you will need time, to build that. So in that transition, we should be partners. We should work together to really, make changes faster. This is the key, I think, And more and more we can see that the public is following, and this is important because it's not a question of government or different group. We have to work all together, and for that, again, there's path that we should develop to be sure that the public will understand and follow, that movement, because without the public, we won't have any success. Again, it's great because in California there's lots of different companies. I'm thinking of Google and Facebook and all those who can be major players, to embark public in that very, very important transformation of mentality. And this is at the heart of what we are doing. It's important that we're not alone, in our little country or province, or we have to work together, to build a real movement of change. And I'm still optimistic because I think that a day like today is a great day because it contributes to that change of mentality. Don't forget also other technology like hydrogen, for example. It's important again to share the expertise and be able to look to new green technology.
Thank you all. Your remarks all remind me of how interconnected we are as a region. Our agricultural systems production is interconnected. Our forest products production and industrial sector is interconnected. Our grid is, as Lisa points out, very interconnected. And our natural systems, our ecosystems are interconnected in many ways. I think also the public understanding and support and mood is interconnected in ways that are complex and important to take into account. So thank you all for those comments. I want to move us to a next question, which I think pulls off of that public mood issue, which is around climate equity. And this has been highlighted in announcements today. It's an increasingly important focus of climate policy. I think all agree that we need to ensure that climate policies moving forward benefit those communities that have suffered the most in the past and those who are most at risk in the future. I'm wondering if the three of you could speak to the impact of this expanded focus on equity on climate action moving forward, and what are some of the key opportunities and challenges that we're going to face moving forward?
I can
Maybe
maybe
I'll start.
start. Okay, why don't you
No, no.
start, Lisa? No, 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 please, 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 please.
Okay, merci. There are two areas in mitigation where we can talk about climate equity, and I think in particular in the Canadian and US context and the Mexican context as well, Indigenous reconciliation in and around climate change and seeing our Indigenous rights holders as the agents of innovation and the agents in particular in relation to climate and nature-based climate solutions is really important. They've had guardians programs from time immemorial in and around the earth, and we can learn a lot. And so that's certainly looking at Indigenous business, looking at Indigenous peoples themselves to learn more. Farmers and agriculture we talked about, so I'll just leave that as another area of mitigation. But where we're really seeing disproportionate climate impacts is in and around the areas of adaptation. No secret, and it's not a surprise to anyone, that the number and nature of extreme weather events has been extraordinary. We've seen a very significant increase, at least in Canada, of very destructive events, and they disproportionately impact vulnerable populations. So looking at adaptation and emergency planning being coordinated, we do this already. If you look at the emergency planning response of electricity producers across the border, we already help each other out. So formalizing that under the realm of climate adaptation for the known 1 in 1,000 year floods, for example, or droughts or fires that are now happening on a 1 in 50 year basis is something we can do very significantly. And first and foremost, looking at our procurement standards and providing for a reward for sustainable construction that, for example, builds a foot off the ground. At the time of construction costs nothing, to retrofit costs a lot. So knowing that we are going to be facing inevitably enhanced extreme climate events, so let's look at our procurement and construction standards and facilitate harmonized procurement that makes sense from an adaptive climate perspective.
Sean, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, thank you. Well, when we think about climate equity, there's many definitions, and we can see it, locally or on the international scene, and this is very, very important. One example: how can we ask other countries to be partners in that, fight against climate change if we don't help them? I mean, there's no way. Uh, and this is where it's so important that we help them to have not only the money to do it, but also the transfer of knowledge. This is the key: transfer of knowledge, transfer of technology also. And it's important to see it like in a context where we will be able to help them to build, to have capacity building. Locally, it's important to include and protect all the workers and the people who will be in the need. And again, this is the key. We cannot think that that new movement, that new era will be for the rich only, or we have to include everybody because it's a common goal. And one other very important section, I should say, of equity will be intergenerational. We have to think of the young generation, of the youth. I mean, they will be the key for success. They push us a lot, and this is great, by the way. And we have to listen to them. We have to make room to indigenous as well, because they have lots of the solution that we are looking for. So again, it's that idea that we have to work together. And when I say together, it's really, everybody.
I'll give just a brief comment, Peter. I agree with a lot of what's been said, but I think in the U.S. context, if we're frank about it, there's been a lot of mistrust of market-based solutions for fear that poor communities don't get cleaned up fast enough, and that results in some of the not necessarily the climate pollutants, but the pollutants that come alongside it that are more in the area of urban smog or in air toxics, that those don't get that corollary benefit of sort of a lift from the climate policy. And I know this is something that the Biden administration has front and center in their own strategic approach to climate change, and I hope that part of what they do is take another look at those existing air quality standards, whether it's in urban smog or whether it's in air toxics, and really, use those tools first and foremost for cranking down on the pollution reductions. If there are additional ones needed in some places, that they're addressed directly, so that we can then maximize the focus on how to stimulate the climate benefits on top of that, rather than the other way around. I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself well, but the thought is that we ought to go after those pollution problems directly, because I certainly wouldn't want climate action to harm children's health or anything like that. So maybe a way of handling it is to deal with it directly at the front end, and then to layer climate policy on top of it. Because as Jean and Lisa point out, the impacts of climate change, especially if you look at it nationally, fall disproportionately in poor communities, and they're the ones that I'm living in a hurricane zone now, and I know around me the impacts of Hurricane Sally are things that it takes the poorer communities a lot more time to rebuild and reconstruct, and I hope that our new resilient infrastructure is through the infrastructure spending that's going to be done, can really prioritize a lot of those areas, so that we bring everybody along, that the solutions help to benefit everyone. And finally, the last thing I'm really hopeful for is that the push from this administration on green jobs creates a lot of opportunity and climate for the underemployed or unemployed, because I think that would also be a really terrific result of all of this, is if we can create the jobs of the future that will really help poor communities the most, because it may give them new prospects for how to contribute to the climate solution rather than just feeling its impacts.
Thank you all very much for those comments. I think you pointed out, in particular, that the intersectional nature of the challenge that we're facing, with the need to ensure that we provide direct benefits to those who suffered the most, both in terms of health benefits on the front end, but also on the adaptation issues, climate emergencies, the extreme events that we're all suffering from more, acknowledging that those communities that have suffered the most in the past are most at risk going forward. So appreciate all the comments on that. The third question I want to pose to the panel has to do with the Conference of the Parties that is coming up this fall. It's just over 6 months from now. It's scheduled to open in Glasgow, in Scotland. After this past year, I suspect many of us are eagerly anticipating attending in person. I hope that's possible. We can, if we're able to do that, we may be able to enjoy a glass of single malt in a cozy Scottish pub between sessions. If not, we'll just have to find an app that lets us do that virtually. So want to acknowledge the challenges we've all faced this past year, and evident from having to do this panel on Zoom. So it's a symbol of, I think for me, it's an indication of the challenges we're facing in terms of adapting to the world going forward, and maybe a sense of our resilience. So as we look forward to COP26, what can we expect? What are the biggest opportunities for progress? Could you highlight things that you think we might really allow for some real progress going forward?
I'll jump in and kick it off. Maybe that this is I think first and foremost going to be a COP about ambition, and we saw that start today, and I think that's going to continue throughout the year as the senior leaders around the world look to encourage each other to take bolder steps on climate change. And that's going to involve finance, and it's going to involve cooperation. So they'll be looking for increases to the commitments to the Green Climate Fund so that it can assist a lot of the poorer countries in doing doing their maximum amount that they can do to contribute to the global effort, but they lack financing for. And then I think it's also going to talk about Article 6 and the rules for accounting for international cooperation. There's nothing in Article 6 that would stop anyone from cooperating. California and Quebec have proven that, right? And Japan is proving that now with its joint crediting mechanism. And Switzerland's proving that now with cooperative models that it has in place with Peru and with Ghana, and it's looking to do with others. So I think the questions are around whether we can get a common rule set for how to account for the cooperation properly so that there's no double counting. And then we can also hopefully establish this UN mechanism that would provide the same kind of certification functions for certain types of emission reductions or removals that was done in the past by the CDM or Joint Implementation Program, or in California and Quebec is done by the independent standards. So that would be, I think, a real benefit for poorer countries, again, to have access to that UN mechanism to quantify and certify reductions for acceptance in more markets. But I wanted just to make the point that this cooperation theme relates to the level of ambition that can ultimately be delivered, because when you're trying to get to net zero, ultimately some of the removal potential and some of the remaining emissions are not going to be in the same countries. So you need a way to get trading systems or some kind of compensation mechanisms in place so that those can be netted out. That's our vision at IETA, and I think a lot of the international business community and even in the U.S. business community recognize the importance of those provisions being there, and also for it to all be backed by good, clear accounting of high integrity. So those are the things that we're looking for the COP. And Peter, I hope we get to raise that glass that you described.
First round's on me.
I'll remember
that. Lisa, John, what are you looking forward to in COP?
Certainly, I would echo everything Dirk said in relation to the market mechanisms. We have been waiting, as Craig said in his introductory remarks, for 5 years, actually going on 6 years, to stand up this markets rule book. And there is so much capital that wants to flow into a certain market with rule sets that we're really looking at increasing ambition through facilitating the sustainable finance that we need into multiple jurisdictions, multiple project types, and overarchingly the transition of energy productivity around the world. So we're really looking at two key elements. The one is sustainable finance, very closely tied to ambition. And in many areas, particularly the jurisdictions, the vulnerable and island states, small and island states that are most impacted by climate change, are very concerned about adaptation funding. So we're going to see hopefully some developments that circle the square that has prevented agreement on a number of those fronts. And then last but not least, we've seen a number of populations and groups that have found themselves in a climate vulnerable, COVID vulnerable, overlapping position. And I think equity will play a very large part of the narrative around this COP, and hopefully part of the decision making and part of the ultimate decisions. Not a rumor or not a surprise that many westernized countries have determined the COVID recessions as she sessions, with women being most disproportionately impacted. So we anticipate seeing developments in and around the Gender and Climate Panel, and in addition, the local communities and Indigenous peoples panel. With that as background, I think there's a great list of what needs to be done, and I'm very anxious to get all of us back together and get every mind together to bring their different perspectives and creative thinking to achieve success in global consensus.
Thank you.
Well, it's difficult to follow. Dirk and Lisa, they said almost all my lines, but I think that we will follow, of course, all the debate around the Article 6. This is, very important, and we are waiting for results from that. So since so many years, I think that the big difference, if we compare to other COP, will be the involvement of the private sectors. So it's going to be very interesting to follow that. Also to follow what will be the role of biodiversity and all that, because going to net zero means that we will have to calculate also, all the GHG that the nature will capture. So it's going to be interesting to see the beginning of maybe a new system for calculating all that. So that is something that I think will be very important to follow. Also, of course, like Lisa said, I think that equity will be at the heart of all discussion, and it's going to touch finance, of course, but also rights, and with an inclusive approach. And this is, what I expect a lot, for Glasgow. And there's one thing that is maybe too bad. I don't think that we will be able to have like 25 or 30,000 people all there to put pressure on countries and us. It's too bad because it's very important, and it's also very fun to be there with and to feel that going to a COP, you come back and you're different because you can feel the power of the movement. And this is I'm not sure we will be able to have that in Glasgow, but maybe I can go back north and take a little take some pieces of iceberg to bring if we get together, so we can use some iceberg ice in your single malt that you will offer.
Well, I certainly look forward to that. And I think your comments all that they make me think of the aphorism of building an airplane as you fly it. I mean, the aircraft of climate action has to take off. We've got a long ways to go, and we're going to have to build the markets, build the rules set as we're moving forward. Waiting for a final perfect set of rules and market systems is going to be too late. So agree with your focus and appreciate the comments. We have time left for one, possibly two questions. So I want to do a quick lightning round. A question that came in, which is, if you had $1 trillion to invest, what are the top three things you would invest in and why? So maybe we can do a quick lightning round. $1 trillion.
Oh, I like that number. Um,
Now we're already up to $1 trillion. So
a couple of things that are on my hot list and really are showing enormous potential is direct air capture and carbon capture and utilization. So, for example, carbon engineering has negative emissions technology where they're actually sucking CO2 out of the air, and it can then be used for specific products such as greater strength cement. Carbon Cure has just won the Carbon X Prize doing that. I love those types of projects where we're taking something that's been seen as a collective world nasty and making it into a useful product. And that's certainly one area. Agriculture. It's not going to get any easier to feed the world, and our human-based crises are going to be significant. So looking at all forms of sustainable alternative agriculture, precision farming, logistics, very, very important. Those would be my top two.
great, thanks.
That's
Jean, you go next.
interesting, if I can. Of course, carbon capture is something very, very important, but in a way also, I think that, I don't think that technology will save us, completely. So we have to change the mentality. So how do we change the global mentality with $1 trillion? Well, maybe I would invest that in communication. You know what? Communication and education is probably what I would do, because we were able, with all the campaign to change our behavior, and we became, our food is the consumption. So if we put, that trillion in communication and education, maybe we will be able to switch to other values. So that's probably where I would, put that $1 trillion.
Great.
Yeah,
Dirk, you got a minute left to spend $1 trillion.
Yeah, I'm just a portfolio guy. I think I would divide it up amongst a set of natural solutions and accelerated electrification, and I like those disposal things. And but Jean, you're absolutely right about the communications challenge. That definitely have to spend a chunk of it on that. And then I think I'd have to use some of it for protecting the coastlines, because we've kind of waited a little bit too long. So the sea level rise concerns are near and dear to me right now. So I probably would put some of that on adaptation.
Great. Well, with that, we're out of time, and I want to offer my sincere thanks again to our three panelists. Thank you so much for participating and taking the time to join the conference today. So much appreciated. Thanks also to the audience, to everybody who called in and participated in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Peter.